Hey, how's it going, guys? My name is Esteban and I'm back with another video. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a REST API with Node.js, Express, and MySQL database. I'm going to be showing you the CRUD operation, which are 4 requests, which is create, read, update, and delete. And then also we're going to be testing our API using Postman. Postman is an application that allows us to test our web APIs. Now in this video, I'm only going to be focusing on the backend. So if you want to learn how to create the front end using React and then the backend and then connecting it to the MySQL database, I have created a 2-part video on how to do that step by step. So if you're interested in that, I'll be adding the link in the descriptions down below. Alright, I hope you like this video. If you do, please like and subscribe, and that will help me out a lot as YouTube will be sharing this video to many others who are interested in this topic as well. Alright, so let's get started in this video. Alright, so what we're going to be building today is going to be an API that we're going to be sending data to it. And this data is going to be a list of employees with a first name, last name, and email. Alright, and to get started, we need to make sure that you have Node.js installed. If you haven't, please go ahead and install it right now. So just click on the first link, download Node.js, and then just hit download. And if you need to verify if you have it installed, just open up a terminal and type in node-v. Alright, so right now I have a version 16. You may have a earlier version or a later version, and it doesn't really matter as long as you have a Node.js installed, okay? Okay, so the folder I'm going to be working on is called CRUD REST API. And inside the folder I have 2 folders. And one of them is client and the other one is server. So the client is my front end, but in this video we're going to be focused on the server. So right now my server folder is empty. So make sure you open up a terminal in VS Code. And I'm going to go into my server folder. So cd server. If you don't have that folder created, make sure you create it with just mkdir and then server. And then just hit enter. Alright, I already have mine created. So I'm just going to change the directory to the server. Okay. And we're going to enter npm init. Hit enter. And then you're going to answer yes or just hit enter to every single one of these options. Alright. So now we go to our server folder. We're going to see our package.json in here. And now we're going to be installing Express, Course, and MySQL. And then also might as well just install our Nodejs as well. And hit enter. Okay, and then in our dependencies, we can see that we have a Course, Express, MySQL, and Nodejs. Alright, and then in our server folder, I'm going to go ahead and create our index.js. And then let's go back to our package.json, and then we're going to go ahead and create a script in here. We're going to name it start. And we're going to put in Nodejs, and then the name of the file that we just created, index.js. So pretty much what Nodejs does is that every time we make a change in our index file, the server automatically restarts after we save the file. And here I've misspelled index. There you go. Okay, so now we're gonna go to ChatGPT, and we're gonna be using ChatGPT to set up our server. So in the message input, let's go ahead and type in exactly what we want. Alright, so pretty much what I put on here is how to set up Node.js and Express with MySQL database, and then also create our CRUD request. Let's go ahead and submit that. And ChatGPT is going to be giving us all the code that we need to set up our Express server. And if you haven't been using ChatGPT, I would recommend you to practice using this, as all developers now, they use ChatGPT to build their projects out on the real road. So before we start working on our server, let's go ahead and also install Postman if you don't have it installed yet. And make sure you install Postman. This is a free tool, and we're going to be using this to test our API. Alright, so let's start setting up our server. So let's go to our index.js and let's start setting up our Express. Okay, and now let's go ahead and set up our port. And our port, we have it listed. Where is it at? We have it listed down here. Where start server. So I'm just gonna do app.listen, and I'm gonna be using port 3000. And then let's create our callback function. We're just gonna console log server running on port 3000. All right, and now we should be able to start our server. So let's go ahead and go to our terminal and let's do npm start dev. And there we go. So we see server running on port 3000. So now we need to connect our app to our database. And in this video, we're going to be using MySQL Workbench. If you don't have it installed, please go ahead and just search on YouTube how to install MySQL Workbench, and it's very, very simple to install that. When you do install it, make sure you use the word password, or just make sure you just remember that password, okay? Because that's going to be super important whenever we start setting up our database. All right, so let's first create our database. And we're gonna name it employee list. All right, go ahead and execute that by clicking on this lightning bolt here. I'm gonna go ahead and comment this out by just command / and to make sure that we use that database we just created, we have to use use and then employee list. Execute that again. All right, and then just to make sure that we are going to be creating our table inside of that database we just created, we could just do select and then database. And execute that again, and they should be able to see the employee list that we just created here. If you're showing a different database here, make sure you run the use employee list script. All right, so now let's go ahead and start creating our table. Table, I'm going to name it employees. And I'm going to be adding an ID, first name, last name, and email. So basically what this is it's going to be our ID. Every single employee that we create is going to have an ID. And this auto increment is going to be incrementing each employee that we create. So the first employee that we create, it should have an ID of 1. And then the second employee is going to have an ID of 2, and so on. And primary key, it indicates that this ID is the primary key for this object or for this employee. All right. So let's go ahead and create our first name now. All right, so now let's go ahead and run the script to create our table. Let's go ahead and comment this out. And to view our table now, it's going to be select and then this asterisk, which is all. So select all from the name of the table that we just created, employees. Actually, I name it employee. And there we go. We have our table with 4 different columns. First column is the ID, and then it's gonna take a value of first name, last name, and the email. So now let's go ahead and go back to our index.js, and let's go ahead and connect our app to our database. And we're gonna be creating a variable. I'm gonna name it DB, and then from here we're gonna be creating our connection. And it's going to be taking a host name, a user, password, and database. The host name is going to be localhost. User is going to be root. The password is going to be password, and database, we named it employee list. Remember from our MySQL workbench. Okay, and it's super important that you use the right username and password. So if you go back to MySQL workbench and then click on administrations and then users and privileges, this is basically what I'm using. I go to my root, and then the host is localhost, and then my password. And so make sure you're using the right username and password, or else it's not gonna work. Alright, so let's just go ahead and test out Nodejs that we can show you exactly what it does. So let's just say we're gonna change our console log. We're gonna go ahead and add a server running in port 3000 from Express server. Alright, and then we'll go ahead and save our file. As you can see down here, right away it restarted our server, and then it added those changes that we just did. Alright, so let's go ahead and start creating a CRUD operation. First, we're going to be creating our GET request, and we're going to be using our request to fetch our data from MySQL. Alright, so it's going to do a /. And our endpoints, they always have 2 parameters, a request and a response with a callback function. First, we're going to create a query. I'm going to name it just Q. And then we're going to add our select all from employees. Alright, so select, and then extract, remember, is all, and then from the table that we created, employee. Okay, so to use our query, we have to do db.query, and then input our script in there, which is, we named it Q, and it's going to return either our error or our data. And so if it returns an error, let's go ahead and just return that error for me. If not, go ahead and return my data. Okay, so now that we have our GET request, let's go ahead and also create our POST request. That way we can start pushing data to our API. And from here, we're going to do /create. And then the same thing, request and response, callback function. And then do another query. And to add data to our table, we use insert into. So insert into the name of the table, which is employee. And then we're going to be putting in our columns, which is first name, last name, and email. And then for our values here, we're going to be adding a question mark. We use the question mark here for security reasons. All right. And then but then here we're going to call our values, and then an array. And our value is going to be request.body.firstname. Same thing for the other two. Okay, so pretty much where we're getting this from is from our request, and each employee that we create is going to have a body with a first name, last name, and email. So that's what we create. So every time we create a new employee, it's going to have these three values. Okay, so let's go ahead and again, let's go ahead and use our query. So db.query, our script that we just created, our value, which is values. It's the one that we just created right now. And then our callback function. We're gonna be expecting an error or our data. So again, if you get an error, let's go ahead and return our error. Let's just return new employee was created. All right, so now that we have our get request and then our post request, we can now start testing our API using Postman. So let's go ahead and open up Postman. Okay, so on this screen, make sure you have the get request selected. And then let's go ahead and type in localhost and then 3000 and then / and then create. Where am I getting the create? Remember our post request we created with a / create. So that's exactly what we have to use in Postman. All right, and then make sure 3000 is the port number that I use. If you use a different port, make sure you input that port number. Okay, so and then in the body section, we're gonna go ahead and create our employee, and this is gonna be in a JSON format. So let's go ahead and create an object, and then we're gonna be creating our first name, last name, and email. So and make sure you use double quotes. So double quotes, first name, name, and then our email. All right, so now that we have created an object with our new employee, we should be able to post this to our database. And actually, this is actually post, not get. Afterwards, we're gonna be doing our get request to see our data. So post localhost 3000 / create. The body section, we're gonna be adding this object, and now let's go ahead and hit send. 200 means that our request was successful. And then as you can see that we have our message, new employee was created. So to test that out, we're going to be using our get request to be able to read this data that we just created. All right, so let's go ahead and change it to get now. Let's go ahead and delete just the create word. We're just going to leave 3000 / on there, and then hit send. Awesome, there you go. Here in the bottom, you see that we have our new employee that we just created. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and add 2 more employees in here. That way we can have at least 3 employees in our database. Alright, so now I should have 3 employees in my database. So again, let's go ahead and go to our GET request. Go ahead and remove our create word on there and send. And there we go. We have 3 employees in our database. So by this tool, we are able to find out that our connection from our app to our database is working. And then also our GET and POST request is working as well. Okay, so now what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be testing my API to see if it's connecting to my front end. I already have my front end created, which is React.js. If you want that code, I'm going to be adding it in the description below. You can grab it from my GitHub account and you could just add it to your project. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I really want to focus just on the back end, but I just want to see that our GET request is going to our front end. However, you don't have to do this. We already tested that our API is working, and whenever we use Postman to test that out. So I'm gonna go ahead and refresh my React page here, and there you go. I have my 3 employees. And just for the fun of it, I'm gonna go ahead and create one more using my UI. Go ahead and submit, and I'm gonna go back, and there we go. I have my new employee here. All right, so now let's go back to our server file and the index.js, and let's go ahead and start creating our update request. And to create our update request is going to be app.put. And it's gonna be /create. And this is going to be requiring an ID. And then again. Okay, and to grab our ID, we're going to be using request.params.id. We're going to name that variable employee ID. Okay, so this ID is super important. That way the database can know which employee to delete or to update whenever we call in those requests. So now let's go ahead and create our query. And the query to update a row is update. So const q. I'm gonna be using backticks now. So update the name of the table, and then set, and then we're gonna be putting every single column that we have: first name, last name, and email, with the equals and question mark. And then our condition is where ID equals question mark, where ID equals this ID. Okay. So now let's go ahead and create our values. And basically it's going to be the same thing as our post. I'm just going to go ahead and copy that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create a query. So it'll be db.query. It requires our script. And then also our value is going to be an array. We're going to spread in our values. And then also we're going to be adding our employee.id. Okay, and then everything else should be the same. Error, data. If it returns an error, go ahead and give us our error. Or let's go ahead and console log employee has been updated. All right, so now let's go ahead and test our put request using Postman. Okay, so let's just say that our employee John wants to change his first name. Instead of John, he wants to be named Jimmy. So we need to find out what the ID for that employee is. And we can see the ID of John is 2. All right, so that's super important. So now that we have the ID, let's go ahead and use our put request. So let's go change this to put localhost. Remember, it's going to be /create and then / the ID, which is 2. And then here in the body, in our body, we're going to type in Jimmy. And his last name is still going to be the same, and the email is still going to be the same. So the Joe, and his email was John. Okay, so what we want to do here is update his name to Jimmy. So everything here should work now. So let's go ahead and hit send. There we go. So we got our message, employee has been updated. So now let's go ahead and check to see if it works. Let's go ahead and go back to our get request. Let's go ahead and delete all this and just leave out localhost 3000 / hit send. And there you go. ID 2, his name is now Jimmy. Cool. So now we know that our put request is working. Okay, so now we're going to be creating our last endpoint, which is going to be our delete. So let's just say that one of these employees get laid off and we want to remove them from our database. So let's go ahead and create our delete request. And that's going to be app.delete. /create, and again this is going to require the ID so that we can know which employee to delete. And in our callback function, again we're gonna bring in our ID, so we're just gonna use this again. So let's go ahead and just copy that, paste it here. And then our query queue, our query is delete, and then from our table, and our condition where ID equals ? All right, then again db.query, our query, our value is only going to be our ID, so employee.id, and then everything else should be the same. Error. So from here we're just going to copy this from our put request, paste it down here. And we're just going to change our message, employee has been deleted. All right, so now let's go ahead and test that out in Postman. So let's go ahead and change this to delete. And this is going to be create, what should this ID? Actually ID, let's go ahead, let's just say that we're gonna be letting go Jack Farm. So Jack Farm has an ID of 3. All right, so let's go ahead and put the ID, which is 3. So let's go ahead and hit send. There you go, employee has been deleted. So now let's go and make sure that Jack farm has been deleted. So let's go back to get. Let's go ahead and remove this. And let's go ahead and hit send to fetch that data. And there you go. We see that JFarm has been deleted from our database. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and go to my front end. And again, I'm just gonna test it out here. We already tested it out in our Postman and everything is working. I just wanna double check to see, make sure our front end looks good. So I'm gonna go ahead and refresh our page. There you go, we do not have Jack Farm in here. Let's just say I wanna delete VV-Ray. Delete, and there you go. Everything is working, guys. Now I'm gonna go ahead and test out my update button. Update. Let's just say I changed my name to Almendaris instead. Almendaris@gmail.com. Submit. And I hit refresh, and there you go. Almendaris@gmail.com. So now we see that our whole backend works. Our create, read, update, and delete. Alright guys, so that completes this tutorial on how to build an API with Node.js, Express, and MySQL. Now I'm going to challenge every single one of you to apply these same steps to create an API in your own projects. But instead of watching this video again, I would like for you to just use Google and ChatGPT to guide you in creating and adding the API to your project. That way you're going to be able to learn, grow, and think as a developer. Hope you liked this video. If you liked it, I would appreciate you hitting the like button and leave me a comment or a question. Y'all stay safe, continue to grind, and never give up, as I believe that everything is possible. See you all in the next video. God bless.